presentation on some different mechanisms of performance tuning, so establishing some performance tuning benchmarks and being able to potentially make improvements to your JD Edwards ERP. So I thought I'd begin by talking to everyone and asking the question, why worry about performance? Why is performance important to you, and why is performance of your ERP important? And I guess it happens that really when you have happier end users, you probably have happier customers, and there's probably a lot of downstream effect of that happy user sentiment. Like if someone's using the ERP and they can find the answers to their question quite quickly and efficiently, then I believe that they'll then that just there's downstream effects of that good performance of your ERP. And it's not just the sentiment that makes a difference. I think there's been a lot of studies have been done, and they've got some amazing data and some amazing statistics about what the performance improvements can mean to the bottom line. And I understand that we're talking about an ERP, not necessarily a web shop front that makes a huge difference in terms of revenue for end users purchasing. But I think we can draw similar analogies and learn from similar lessons that these big online shops and online houses have learned. And I think a startling statistic here in the beginning is this was from the UK's largest online eyewear store, and this is what this statistic comes from. And they determined that a 1 second delay in a page load time, that equals 7% loss in conversations, 11% fewer page views, and a 16% decrease in customer satisfaction. That's all for a 1 second delay in the loading of the page. And for this particular organisation, that affected the bottom line to the sum of $2.5 million a year. So, whoa. And right, Robert? What did they sell to say 2 months? Some more examples of what performance can mean to the bottom line. From Amazon, you can see there, for a 100 millisecond delay, so that's it's a tenth of a second, revenue down 1% for Amazon.com. What AOL found is that when people were on the top 10% of their web servers, or at the time when they were getting that top 10% performance, they were viewing 50% more pages. And then Yahoo saw that for just below half a second, so for a 400 millisecond improvement in performance, they increased traffic by almost 10%, 9%. So there's some pretty dramatic figures there, and I think they paint the picture that we'd like, that improving the performance of our ERP can also make a difference to our bottom line, but also make a difference to our user community, and really make a difference to the product, and make it, if it's used more, it'll get upgraded more, etc. So what I'm going to talk to you today is 4 different pieces of software, or 4 different mechanisms which you could deploy in your environment to understand the performance of JD Edwards and to make a difference in JD Edwards. So the 4 that I'm going to talk about, first of all, I'm going to introduce some new software that's been developed by Myriad IT, and that's the Performance Workbench. Okay, and that's downloadable as an ESU, and if you want to come to me, I'll give you a free copy of the software here, and we'll talk about more of it when it's its turn. Then we're going to talk about Google Analytics. So what Myriad have also done is we've plugged in your ERP to Google Analytics, and we're able to get real-time performance data out of your ERP. We're able to determine usage patterns. We're able to trigger alerts based on performance metric breaches, and we're able to do all this through the Google Analytics engine, which is it's a pretty exciting project to be involved in, and the results are amazing, and you can really learn a lot about how your ERP is used and how generically ERPs can be used, and what performance metrics our clients are getting. So hopefully I'll be able to do a live demo on that for you and show you how you can drill down into that information. The third option I'm going to talk to you about, I won't talk too long about it, but it's Oracle Application Testing Suite. So I spoke last year about Oracle Application Testing Suite, but I'll just talk in a little bit more detail about how that can augment the processes in which you go through to improve performance, or at least establish a performance benchmark. And then finally, we're going to talk about an Oracle product called RUI. Okay? So we'll talk about that. And that's the grizzly bear of performance tuning and performance metrics and benchmarking. But we'll go through that in some detail. So first of all, I want to talk about the Performance Workbench. As I said, it's an ESU that's been developed by Myriad. We've got a series of objects in this ESU, so it's, like I said, it's a PAR file. You can put that into OMW on your side. You can build an update package, and you can run this application. And essentially what it does is it goes through a series of performance-focused tests at your organisation, and it's able to test different tiers of your ERP. So it can test Java performance, database performance, it tests business function performance, and UBE performance. And what it does to the microsecond, it can calculate that performance, and then it actually allows you to benchmark that. So it stores this performance data in an internal table, and it keeps storing it. So every time you run this, so maybe you could schedule this as a report, and it could run hourly, it could run daily, and you could start to build a pattern of your ERP performance, which is pretty exciting. What it also does, and the reason it gets given away, because there's always a catch, isn't it? It actually emails me the data, but then what I can give you is an industry standard. I can tell you how you compare to other organisations, or not to other organisations named, how you compare generically. So I can establish a standard performance benchmark and tell you where you are in terms of your UBE performance, your business function performance, your JDBC performance. I can tell you that information. And so then I can also give you some pointers, hey, your database is slow, or Java's very slow for you, or insert's very slow, and I can help you out. So what I think I'll do is, if I can, if the demo gods are good to me, I'll just try and set off a performance test to show you how this software works. So I'm in our demonstration website here. I'll just run the application. It's very complex, very difficult to run. Okay, it's running. So it's just one button click, that's all you have to do. Now that's running in the background. Now we've got to appreciate that this runs a lot of stuff. It's inserting 1,000 rows, it's updating them, and it's getting microsecond timing for all of these operations. It's running complex business functions, it's doing all sorts of things, it's running reports. So let's leave that in the background and go back to our presentation, and hopefully it finishes. Oh, that's not what I want. Let me go back to where we were. So while that's running, we'll continue to talk about this. And so what this does is, it establishes a performance benchmark. And what's handy about that is if you were to change anything about your organisation, if you were to change network architecture, if you were to introduce a different database, put in a new tools release, you can run this software and you can immediately know whether you're faster or whether you're slower. And if you were to install this ESU, which I'd like everyone to be able to do, and the information can come back to me, I can tell you where you stand generically in terms of how quick your site is, with an industry standard. So that'd be great. And of course, so what the software does, and hopefully what we'll see, is we get a graphical representation of the various tests that are executed along the way and how long those tests took. And what you'll see that because some of them take about 16 seconds, we don't get a lot of detail in the graphical representation, but the data is there in the table. So these all might be 0.0025 of a second, but the data's there and it's real, and we can compare that next time we run it. As I told you, it does specific business function calculations, and it really hits the business function service hard. It measures web performance because it interactively goes through code, so it runs ER on a web server and it runs a bunch of JDBC, so we get that information. It launches a UBE, and then the UBE pretty much executes the same tests again, but it's at a different tier, it's using a different runtime engine, so we can compare that with your JDBC times. It's an interesting question. Does anyone know if I inserted 1,000 rows with JDBC, and then I through an application, and then I inserted 1,000 rows with a UBE? Anyone have any idea which would be quicker? JDBC? Well, it is actually a UBE that's quicker, but interestingly, it's almost twice as quick, always. So then you think about your developers and you think about how we write code, and hey, if you put that in a business function, you're going to get similar good performance, whereas JDBC, it's not really for the chatty back and forth, because JDBC is going to have to go web server to database, web server to database. Whereas if you run a big business function, it's going to do it all for you. It's all right there, it's hard. But these are the sorts of things you can learn with interpreting this information. And like I said, when the information comes back to us, so it sends an email, so I'm not being sneaky about this, it sends me an email, and it has just the test run and how long each of your steps took. And then what I can do for you is I can give you some graphical template or an infographic which shows you where you sit in terms of your site's performance compared to everyone else as an average. So let's go back to our screen and see if that's finished. I hope it has. There we go. So I promise that that is the same screen we looked at before. But what you can see there is the test execution has completed, and there is my run times for these specific things. So we can see that I've got quite a slow database on my demo server, and it takes about 16, 17 seconds to insert those 1,000 rows. But then it runs as an NER, and it's a bit quicker, and then it runs from UV, and it's a bit quicker. Now this is a virtual demo server, so it's not the beefiest machine around, but you get the picture. So that's option one that I wanted to talk to everyone about, and come and get the R file off me and install that. I think it's well worthwhile. You can't schedule the application, of course. You're going to have to run that manually, but you can certainly schedule the UVE, which does 50% of the performance testing.
Is it best run at full-time production?
That's a good question. Look, it hits one kernel really hard. You'll see one kernel spike through the roof like this. When it does this, the business function test, we wrote a complex business function, so it actually does financial calculations essentially, and it takes 16 seconds. So it sits on that CPU and just thrashes at 100% for 16 seconds, and you can see that runs 4 times. So yes, that will happen, but any of your users will only receive at most a 16-second wait if they're single-threaded and behind you, and that would be very rare because kernels are multi-threaded these days. Okay. So that's option one. Option two is what we say, we've coined it ERP analytics. So what we've been able to do is plug in the ERP to the Google Analytics engine, and then you're able to drill down and farm that data and farm your users, how they use the system. You can see what applications they're running. You can use this for determining who is your busiest user, who's using the application the most. So you can do some efficiency analysis. There's a lot of interesting information, and I guess it's quite, as is, I guess with big data, you don't know all of the uses of the information, but we're tracking the information. So in the fullness of time, there might be many more good uses of this information, but at least you're tracking it now, and you're able to drill down on it now. So I've just got a few screenshots, but then I hope to do some live demos as well. So this just shows you some of the graphical feedback that you get back from Google Analytics. And you can see, usage patterns. You can see, these are screens that are a 5-work day, and so we're busiest on Monday. It drops a bit down on Tuesday, but you can see this day was busy, etc. And then you can drill down into each of these days and you can see who was your busiest user on that day. You can see how many apps did they run on that day. Oh, you can see your busiest app on that day. You can get all that information. You can see how long that page took to load on average. So there's some amazing information that's being tracked. You can get browser information, so you can determine what sort of technology is out there. You can see how people are using your ERP. You can see if they're using a tablet, a mobile phone, or a PC. You can tell what browser they're using. So you can also do some analysis on the technology that's reading your ERP, as well as the performance information reading it. So this really sometimes demos well. So let's have a look. So what I've got here is a real-time dashboard of a client's ERP data, okay? So this, I can tell there's 62 users on site now. This is the page views per minute that they're receiving, and this is per second. This is live now for this particular site, okay? And so I'm able to see where they're coming from. And so they're all from Australia. We can drill down into Australia and see where those connections are coming from. And there's a lot from Perth, so we guess their ISP might be in Perth. Because this is not an exact science, this depends on the pipe out to the internet for the particular organisation. But we can see that there's some people in Sydney and there's some people in Victoria. We see traffic sources, events, etc. And then what we've augmented this standard solution, or the standard Google Analytics engine, and we've actually created some customised reports. So then what we're able to do is drill down into the actual usage of the ERP and see what apps are being used and what users are using those apps. So if we scroll down here, we can see these are the particular users that are using 13,000 page loads, and then we can see for particular days what they've been doing, and we can drill down to that and see the applications that they've been running. And then we can drill into these applications and see the performance metrics. So all of this is being stored in Google Analytics, and all this information can be cut, sliced and diced for you to determine how the application is performing, who's using it, how it's being used. It's pretty neat, Jeremy.
And how's it connecting to your system?
Secrets. That's why you talk to me. No, we wrote software.
What's the security here? It's talking directly to the web server, I'm assuming.
No, it's client.
Okay.
So it's client-based, and you can Google how Google Analytics works, but essentially you sort of inject a header into every page, and it's really quite innocuous. And so if there's no internet connection, you get no data. But if there's an internet connection, it'll shoot off a tiny packet to Google to say page loaded, and then it just continues to do that. So we see no performance degradation. We've measured it with oats, and it's insignificant in the scheme of things. Just go back. So that's the second method that I wanted to talk about of measuring your ERP performance, and that's just some sample screens of what you can do. Oh yeah, and what I also wanted to talk about was you can attach alerts. To any of these metrics. So for some of my clients, I've got page load time alerts. So if the page load time on average is less than a certain threshold which I've specified, it sends me an email to say that their site is going slow interactively. And then I can look into I can analyse what's going on. Maybe I could run my performance workbench. Maybe I could do some other things to work out where the performance problem is. So I guess that's the handy thing about the performance workbench, is because it does these tests, because you've got your site averages, you know how quick your site should be, and then it will test web, it'll test database, and it'll test logic, and then you can start to narrow down your focus on fixing this performance problem. The next, the next topic, I guess, is, and what we're really, there's a pyramid of solutions here, I guess, and as you saw, the performance workbench is really easy to install, really easy to run. It's cheap because it's free, but that gives you a pretty good impression of where your performance is at, but potentially not the analysis that you want. And then the second thing is our Google Analytics, and that gives you, unparalleled ability to analyse that information. Okay, so you can analyse things any which way, but it doesn't really tell you what the machines are doing. It doesn't give you your performance next door. Your hardware performance next door to your application performance. Okay, so it doesn't give you that information. So what Oats does is Oats actually just measures everything. So you can do load testing with Oracle Application Testing Suite, that is Oats. And when you do load testing with Oats, you get all your hardware metrics, you get your database metrics, you get your web server metrics, you get all this analysis right next to the page load times and your actual end user run times. Okay, so all of that comes together and when you want to do troubleshooting or actual performance analysis and bottleneck trouble, and really performance is just this endless pursuit, performance analysis is this endless pursuit of bottlenecks. So what you're trying to do is find the next bottleneck, you fix it, you move on, there's another one, you fix that, and then there's another one, because that's what happens with performance tuning. And so what Oats is able to do is really allow you to do that without affecting your users, because you can simulate as many users as you think is pragmatic for your site, and you can get them running as virtual users. You can choose the geographical region which these users come from. So you can say, hey, I want 10 to run from Perth, I want 20 to run from Sydney, 150 from Melbourne, a couple from Singapore. And you can get all of that information with your load testing, and then you can take the network out, you can look at latency, you can compare your Singapore users with your Sydney users. You can do all these things with the Oracle Application Testing Suite, but you're not affecting your end users, so you can make changes. You can tune your database, you can tune your web servers, your app servers, etc. And then you run the same test again. And with that benchmark, you can do no better analysis and you can do no better comparison than running the exact same test again. And so what we do at Myriad is we own the software, and we can come out and we can just use our version of the software. We can somewhat lease it to you so that we can execute these tests. There's no capital expenditure. You don't buy the software. We've already bought it. You just get the use of our software. And so we can come in and we can run a test and get you a benchmark. You're right. This is your benchmark. We use your top 20 processes or your top 10 processes. We use your data. We log into your servers. We could do this on a Sunday night. We can do this whenever you like. Then you might choose to change your tools release. You might choose to change your SAM, to change some piece of technology. And geez, I really hope my users survive this change. We can wheel these tests back and just hit go. They've already written. We've got your benchmark. We can tell you, oh, well, that new SAM, you got 10% extra performance, or you got this, or you got that. And maybe you'd augment that with also our performance workbench to get those millisecond times, not virtualized users and not the full simulation. But you could, use the performance workbench to give you some level of detail and satisfaction, reiteration that your technology change has been positive. But then Oats gives you that full simulated knowledge that everything's going to work. And of course, the nice thing about Oats is when you look at the graphs in Oats, you can see the performance and you can see the response times for your users and the page load times, etc. But then you can overlay that graph and that view with your web server CPU usage, or your web server disk usage, or your database server data cache hits, and all these sort of things. You can overlay all these graphs, and that's what makes the bottleneck analysis easier. And that's why Oats is really good for actual tuning. Okay? And so, what we do is, load testing is a very complex area. It's it is somewhat in a laboratory, because we are dealing with virtual users and we are choosing the transactions that they're going to run. But the nice thing about it is that we choose, that we have a framework around it, so that we choose your business transactions, common business transactions from your business, or we run your customer reports, or it is tuned for you. So you might do a lot of sales orders and a few purchase orders, and so we might do 40 sales order users and 10 purchase order users, and we might do some from a certain site and some from another site. And we're able to put all that together in what I would call a load test matrix or a profile, and then we can execute that against your machines. And then whether you're SQL Server or AS400, we get all the metrics from all your hardware and feed all that into the engine, and then we start looking at bottlenecks. Now the nice thing about this offering also is that because we've done this, I like to say, I don't know what I say, it's not our first rodeo. Because we've done this so many times, we kind of know how fast your web search should be going, and we kind of know how many hits per second you should be getting. And well, let's be honest, I know how quick the database disks are, and I actually know the organisation knows what's the worst thing that could possibly happen is slow disks on your database server, because that's going to wreck everything. So we know that. So then we know how many megabytes per second those database disks should be getting. And so, because we've got all these standards because we've run these tests, a dozen times at a dozen different clients, we can hone in quicker on where you might be having some performance issues at your site. We follow a methodology when we do we do a shakedown. So we do a shakedown test, and what a shakedown test is, we might choose 5 scenarios. We just load it up with your maximum users. We'll choose a user delay, an average delay time of maybe between 1 and 3 seconds, something like that. Really hit everything hard. So the shakedown's designed not to put core business transactions through the system, but just to make sure that you've got enough database connections, you've got enough HTTP connections, you've got enough JVMs, etc. for your load balancing's need. So we do a big shakedown, make sure, rattle the cage, make sure everything's sorted. We might make some changes because, quite often the shakedown won't even work. Honestly, I go, people preparing for a go live or an upgrade, quite often the shakedown will not work. Okay? It'll just fall apart. We'll have to make a bunch of changes just so that the client can hit their perceived maximum number of users. I couldn't tell you how many times I've gone to a site and the load balancing has been wrong. There's no affinity for JVM, so you have cookie problems. Oh, look, there's so many issues, but the shakedown test is really important in terms of doing your load testing. And then we go through this series of what we like to do is record, run, learn, and improve. So we record your scenarios, you identify them, you identify your top 20 scenarios, we record them in own. So it's just looks at what you do in the browser and you make a repeatable test. Really easy to do. But there's a few smarts in making them repeatable. And then we execute the test. So we run the test for you through the load testing workbench, and we run them from your remote locations, etc. And once you've run all those, once you've run all your tests and you have all the information, we're able to learn from that. So we're able to see, was your web server pegged? Was your database server pegged? Was there too many connections on this server, etc. So we're able to work all of that out, make some changes, run it again, run it again, run it again. And what we always want to do with our load testing is give you 3 predictable full load test runs. So we want at least an hour of your maximum user count for at least an hour, run 3 times predictably. Look through the logs after each test. You've got to make sure that the test has succeeded. Sure, all your screens might indicate success, but if you've got a shed load of logs with duplicate keys and things, that's not good for the business. So we check all your logs, we check the enterprise server logs, we check the logs everywhere. We make sure the database has got all the transactions that we expect. Because if I've run 5,500 sales order entries in my load test, I check the database and make sure that there's 5,500 sales order header lines, and then I'll count the detail lines. And that gives us a really good feeling that, well, not only is the system handling the load, but it's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing. So that's the methodology we follow there. I might have talked about these, but these are just, the Myriad or my top 10 tips for my load testing. I always tell you, don't choose the longest running jobs for your scenario. So quite often I'll go back to a client and I'll say, all right, let's set up your load testing, and they give me 10 integrity reports. And it's like, well, yeah, sure they take a long time, but they take a long time for everyone. It's not testing, it's not a real indication of your system and how it's performing. So what you want to do is get the common transactions, and you can do that by going to Server Manager and looking at the business function runtimes, and look at master business functions and sort by a number of times executed. That gives you a pretty good idea of common transactions that you want to pump through load testing. Choose scenarios that demonstrate, that test different parts of your ERP. So do some batch work, but not just batch work. Do some interactive work. You can feed dynamic. The scripts are amazing. You can feed dynamic data into them. You can do all sorts of things. You can feed them with CSVs, with data files. You can do whatever you want. So, but choose tests that. I like to choose a test that will hit the front end bit, so it'll page down through loads of data, because that really tests your JVM. And then I like to do a test which will run master business functions, really pound sales order entry or something like that. And then I like some batch jobs and maybe some noisy ones in the background, and then maybe some proper ones that even do VI publisher. So you're testing that kernel out as well. You're testing your whole system as much as you can. I also think it's really handy to actually test beside the load test. So just log in and use the app while there's 400 virtual users on the system. And then you get a really good feeling yourself how the app's performing. And quite often, the way JD behaves, it's usually very good. Because everything's cached and the web service rely on this cache, and when you've got 400 virtual users pounding the system, all the caches are nicely loaded, and you log in, you find that it performs pretty damn well, if it's right. Get your monitoring right. It's essential that you monitor everything, because this constant bottleneck analysis, this finding bottlenecks, fixing them, finding the next one is vital. Make sure you get all of your monitoring right, and it's great to have it all in a central location, because you can't run Performon on one machine and SNMPT traps on another and work out your performance from there. It's just not good enough. You need it all working from the Oats, and Oats allows you to do that. One central console, all of your statistics, even go back in time. Because what can happen in 3 months' time, you go, oh, geez, this thing's performing like a dog. But you can go back and look at Oats and you can see how many disk reads per second the database has. So you know, well, we should be achieving this, and you can check against those numbers as well. So it's important to have all that performance data in one place. I like to, when you script it, you make your scripts repeatable. So maybe it sets up the data, uses the data, deletes the data, or adds a sales order, ships a sales order, etc. You want the scripts to be totally repeatable. So you just log in and you can run them at any time, and they'll just execute. Okay? So I think that's important. For the nerdy people amongst us, you get to know your regular expressions and web, and load testing and web, and regular expressions, and more regular expressions. And they're fantastic. Check log files, check transaction counts, we talked about that. A trick for young players is when you're recording scripts, remember that just say you're entering a purchase order, and because it's load testing, it'll do the same thing again, and you enter a description. Well, the next time you do it, it's going to be a warning, because it's going to tell you there's a duplicate description, right? And if you load test before you get the warning, the script will never run, because it doesn't know that a warning's popped up, right? So usually when you're recording, I usually go through the scenario a couple of times, just manually, make sure I understand it, and then I'll record it, but I want all the warnings and everything to come up as if it was a repeatable process. Start with a small test and build up to big numbers. I think that's common sense. And this is really important. Load test the most mature environment possible. So get all of your security in place. Get your load balancing done. Cut your secure certificates for your web service. Do absolutely everything. Get the most mature environment possible. Shakedown, sure. Shakedown can happen on really whatever you want, and we can put some caveats in there for that. But your official load testing, get it in on the most mature environment. The next thing I want to talk about, and hopefully there's a Victorian in the audience that's going to get my joke here. I giggled for about a week when I put this screen together. Rui, does anyone know who Rui is? Does anyone know that Nick Rewalt, they call him Rui? That's right. A lot of New South Wales people. I didn't laugh for a week, like an hour maybe. Well, I want to talk about the grizzly bear of performance tuning and benchmarking. Another Oracle product, not a Myriad written product, and this is called the Oracle Real User Experience Insight. And this is an amazing piece of software. It's a large piece of software. And what this does is it uses network taps and it uses port mirroring and things to actually record all of the HTTP packets that are coming into your ERP. So it does all this fancy network analysis, and it will allow you to replay a day in the life of your ERP. So you can actually replay the whole day. And if some user complains about, oh, the ERP was slow this morning, you can replay the ERP to when it was slow. And you can go to that particular transaction, and then you can see what all of the systems around were doing at that time, and you can drill down into exactly what was going at that point in time. So it's an incredible piece of software. There's quite a bit of setup to get it up and running. You have your own RUI server, etc. But then what it provides you is this amazing dashboard and this amazing ability to drill down into that actual real performance data, so you can see what you can actually experience. I guess, and this is the whole thing, you can experience what your users were experiencing at that point in time. So you can imagine there's quite a lot of database synchronization that has to go on here as well. So you have to snapshot your database to replay to that point in time. But RUI gives you the ability to do that. So it gives you the ability to see or experience what your users were experiencing in real time. Finished early. Oh, nice. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Okay, Shannon, you were talking about checking the database for transactions. What are the common reasons why, when you're running a load test, you wouldn't get all the transactions you're trying to simulate?
Look, there's a lot of reasons. When the system's under pressure, the kernel could crash. When the system's under the pressure of the database, you might run out of JDBC connections from your web server. There's a number of reasons when your system's under pressure. Because all the testing that you've done up to your load test is probably UAT or SIT, where one person enters the transaction, they check that their purchase order and they got to the database, and that's all good. But it's a very different environment when we're sending 150 users at once, beating this thing with data, because then you've got next number issues, you've got data synchronization issues, you've got lots of things a lot more things that can go wrong when you're really pounding this thing with a lot of transactions.
What versions are you supporting on your Google Analytics?
Web. So you have to be web, but that's all. So as long as you're on the web, it'll work. Won't work with that one. And we're working on plugging in. We're working on plugging in your UVEs to it as well. So we'd like to get that sort of information, and we think it's possible. All these products are being enhanced all the time, so that's why I say it'd be great for you guys to download them. It's a very simple installation, but they're getting enhanced all the time. So we're giving you better insights into how your ERP is performing, and better dashboarding and better information.
Where are you writing the data? When you do load testing, is it writing to your own function tables?
So with Oats is simulating users, so they will be entering transactions into the environment that it's running in, so they will be entering data into production, but all of the metadata, all of the performance data from the tests, that's all written internally to an Oats database. So Oats has its own Enterprise Edition Oracle database with a proprietary table format that it records all of that information in, and it gives you the ability to report over that.
So you're not going to do this into production,
So people can, and you could do this into production. You would have to be careful about what sort of data you put in terms of business data. Or you would snapshot your database, you run your load testing, and then you just restore the database back up. So there are options. Or you'd use a pre-prod environment, which I often do, which has it would sit on the same physical hardware as production, and the web servers would be on the same physical hardware. It's just a different IP address and things, and that's quite often what we do to do a production load test. But I would say that if I was preparing for a go live, I would always load test the production environment. Everything in production, everything as you're going to go live. because with a load test you have a list of caveats and you want that as short as possible. Okay? So load testing is a very it's a political hotspot. It really is. You know, I always find that when I do load testing, because you have to start being critical. You have to say, well, I think this is slower, I think that's slower, and that's what someone's job is, and that's their passion. And so it's a very political thing to really get into load testing and try and tell people, well, this is not good enough, this is not good enough. It's a tough environment to be in. We do load testing for North American clients, and we do load testing all over the place now. We're doing quite a bit of this as a service, and yeah, it gets quite heated sometimes when you're telling people, look, you know, the load balance is not right, and this is not right, and, but that's what happens.
Just in terms of you, the experience, what about elements outside of your enterprise server, your kernels, like network latency, or is my ADSL linked up to scratch? Is my Internet Explorer have enough memory on whichever server I was using? Does that capture that in terms of?
No. So none of these clients will give you Oats will, and really all of the products that we displayed there will give you what the end user experience is. But no, it doesn't analyse the PC that the end user is sitting on. It will get the network latency component of that, and even Rui will do the same, because it understands the network architecture, it understands where the packets were going to and coming from, so it can give you that information as well. But none of these products have an element on nothing more than like a timestamp gatherer on the front end, like in the browser. It's not going to tell you that your virus scan is causing you a problem. It's not going to tell you those sorts of things.
But you would say through Google Analytics, at least you'd be able to tell that this user has taken twice as long as this user to open the same application.
Yes.
Or run the same process.
Yes, you could. Yeah. And Oats would give you that information as well if you had the geographical separation of your tests.
They could run in any browser?
Yes. Well, which?
Oh no, Internet Explorer, Chrome, Firefox.
Oh yes, so Oats can simulate any browser, and our ESU, the Performance Workbench, can run in any browser. And of course Rui, because it's at a network level, so that's browser independent. And I'm trying to remember Google Analytics, absolutely. Like Chrome.
Yeah, that's Chrome.
Anything else? Okay. Right, I'm going to get you a copy of the software. Better give this away. Thank you for listening.